You can applaud. Wonderful film. It was actually Taiwan submissions for the Oscars last year, and the other thing that I didn't realize is that the executive producer is Wong Kar-wai. For those of you who are fans of his films, I don't know, fans of Wong Kar-wai here. He's one of the leading Asian directors out there today, and has been for the last 10 years. Of course, the film is actually based on the lead character's real story, and he plays himself, even though it's a narrative and it's fictionalized. It's based on his real story, and he is playing himself, which was a real stretch for him, I'm sure. I'll bring you out of school. I'm also going to take this opportunity to thank our audio describers. One of them's with us here tonight, David Linton up there. Anyone who used the audio description, a rating? Great is what we were looking for. Good. Richard, thank you so much for being here. I'm handing you the mic, and we'll hand things over to you a little bit. What did you think of the audio description?
I was very enchanted by it. I really, in fact, I was very engaged with the whole film. Having gone through some of these musical study experiences myself, and also having known a lot of blind, very young musicians who were serious about their music and entering college, and even during the last 2 years. So I was engaged all the way. The audio description was very good, and I'd say 95% of it I comprehended very well.
All right, that's great. I would love your general reflections on the film, on his experiences as a musician, and on his experiences specifically as a student.
Mine varied. I would say there were three-tiered. First of all, I know you mentioned I wasn't totally blind at birth, but I was visually impaired. So that first experience was in schools for the visually impaired. Then I was mainstreamed. Now, when I became totally blind, and that was in 1976, so that's 37 years ago. So, 1976, at that time, I had first decided that I would have to maintain my viability as a musician, as a teacher, as all the things I had been doing, because I was already an adult. And I had strong music education. I had already studied with some of the best music teachers in the world. I came to New York as a Juilliard student with sight, so it was going to be quite a shock. So then what I did was to arrange to speak with a gentleman. Some of you may know who this gentleman is, but he was the world's #1 flutist. I'm a flutist too, and that was mentioned at the beginning of the movie, that the flute was part of the education of Zhang. So, there was a flutist at that time who was #1 in the world, was Jean-Pierre Rampal, and he was coming to New York to play with an orchestra, one of the Mozart flute concertos. I had a friend who was playing in the orchestra. I happened to take him to the rehearsal. I spoke with him, and as a result, I was able to study with him in France. Now, that would be the first tier, and what I found there was the way that I was made part of the family of other musicians, all of whom were good. This is a summer, the Académie Internationale d'été, summer music school in East France, and so I was treated, I guess, the way Zhang was by some of those who became his friends, such as his roommate. People took me to classes. I stayed in the city university, in the dormitories. I could normally not have afforded something like that, but once you were okay, it was like getting a scholarship from France to study it. I guess one funny story would be that that one night we were going to go swimming, and I told them I couldn't go because I didn't have my bathing suit, and their response was, "Nobody has a bathing suit." So, and I was in southern France at the time, so, but of course my American morals was that no one was going to see anything that I couldn't see. So that was it. Tier 2 would be my studies as a scholar, much on my own. I was self-sponsored, doing research largely in Africa. I also did some in Haiti, but I did a lot of research in African music and culture, and a lot of humanitarian work, taking things over to musicians. So that I was made part of the African family. I consider myself a continental African as well as an African American, which is why you see me dressed somewhat like I am now, which I always am. And so there, I would say that I was protected, and I was had no trouble whatsoever. The difference being that I had to go around streets that had no sidewalks, had to avoid open litters and that sort of thing. But I can't say I depended on these people. A better way for me to put it is that they were so sensitive that they took care of me. I got anywhere I wanted. Their object was to make me know as much as I wanted to learn about their music and culture. The final tier was like something like a GD. Going back to school many years later as an adult, I did a master's, I did a PhD as a blind man, and commuting. I found it interesting with Chiang and his mother traveling on that train, because I commuted to Temple University in Philadelphia, and I was originally from Philadelphia, as I said before, I came as a Trudeau student. When I arrived at the bus station, or later train station, my sister was always there with one of my brothers. They would always pick me up and take me onto campus. I would be on my own on the campus, and they would return at night to take me back to the bus. I would come back alone to New York, because I was by then already teaching at the United Nations International School. So I was a commuter all the way. I don't know if you have any other particular things you want me to bring up.
I would love to get any questions, comments, thoughts, reflections from our audience, and we'll take it from there.
Do we know, well, does anybody know what happened with, how do I pronounce it, Zhang? I'm not sure how to pronounce it, with the lead and the lady, what actually, because I know it's based on a true story, what actually happened with them?
It's based on a true story, but they leave it pretty inconclusive, I think, as far as the relationship goes, and I don't know the specifics of where it's gone, but this was also years ago within he's possibly moved on to many other stages in his life.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah, and you know, it brought back to mind to me. Sometimes at the UN school, I find music that I arrange for my students to perform at the end of the year, and one of the ones that I remembered was this Chinese legend, Liang Xiangbo Zhu Ling Tai, which is sort of like a Romeo and Juliet kind of story, where it's a very, very famous tune, and that is in China. And but it tells the story of these two young lovers from opposite sides, the opposite family types, where at some point they both die at the end, and they are buried together. And at some point after that, two butterflies arise from the grave. So I think the Chinese are very probably into these type of romantic stories with these open endings or strange endings.
Take a question down here.
I think it's possible to interpret the ambiguity in their relationship as a cultural phenomenon, but I also find in general in cinema a reluctance to show a romantic lead with a full-blooded, full-bodied sexual relationship between disabled people, whether two disabled people or a disabled and non-disabled couple, which is kind of the way I interpreted it. Of course, I know next to nothing about Asian cinema and Taiwanese in particular, and it is possible that ambiguity is endemic to the, in general, but I have a feeling not.
Interesting. And we do hear ReelAbilities at times. See some films that push that envelope a little bit and try to show. I mean, I think the independent films and some of the artsier films will be a little more daring, but this is a pretty mainstream film.
And as she said, I think they may have been cautious along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly certain, but the male lead was the right, but the female lead she was not. Was there a particular reason why the female lead really appeared very minimally Asian? Her facial appearance?
She looked American.
Yes, she did. She looked American.
She's half French, half Taiwanese.
I'm sorry?
Half French, half Taiwanese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that that's a very interesting point. I thought that perhaps the reason for the ambiguity was maybe even to show, I think so many times, like when we watch movies like this in regular cinema, we're often kind of looking for some kind of ending to leave us with some kind of feeling. But I think perhaps the purpose of this movie was kind of to show how their relationship had helped both of them to become successful, and whether it continued or not was almost kind of like irrelevant, because both of them had, kind of found themselves and had been able to follow after their dreams after being pushed by a supportive person in their life.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was much deeper than a romantic relationship. I think they each gave each other an incredible gift. One of my comments was the lack of any physical touch, even with the mother and the son. And when the son left, even to say goodbye to his sister, there was no physical hugging. And when the mom kept leaving the dorm, so I was just curious whether that's part of that culture. There was never.
But in the film, in the audio description, wasn't the son massaging the mother when and of course there was the reference of the roommate of Zhang in a joking way, about what kind of breast that she had. So I don't think that was totally avoided.
No, there was a sense of affection that you never saw in the family when they left. There was never any hugging, so I was just curious whether that was part of the culture.
That, I myself don't know, but I would say, but when you use the word culture, I think that, it's like European, especially the French, it's traditional to hug. Now, that, at least before I became accustomed to European culture, I don't think I experienced that, well, certainly not as much as I did with Europeans.
To answer your question, I think it is pretty much true that hugging is not really in the dictionary of at least of East Asian to express the affection. It's very more restrained.
Thank you very much.
Folks, I want to thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Richard, thank you so much.